This story begins in the kind of winter that makes even the mountains hold their breath. On a night when the wind erased roads and the snow swallowed sound, a small black puppy was seen dragging something across the frozen ground. Not a toy, not food, but a life. Inside that soaked bag was another puppy who should not have survived, and the one pulling her refused to let go. What happened next changed a police officer, a whole town, and two fragile lives forever. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from and leave a comment. Because this is a story about hope finding you, no matter where you are in the world. White Willow, Montana had not seen the sun in 3 days. The sky hung low and heavy, like a lid pressed down on the world, and the snow kept falling. Not the playful kind that children chase with open mouths, but the relentless, sideways kind that erased roads, swallowed sound, and made even the strongest buildings feel temporary. Street lamps glowed like tired stars through the storm, and the wind carried the voice of the mountains, old and impatient, whispering warnings to anyone foolish enough to ignore winter. Inside the White Willow police station, Officer Nathan Cole sat at his desk, shoulders slightly hunched, jacket still on, gloves folded beside a half-finished cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. Nathan was 41, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of frame that once filled doorways easily but now moved with the quiet caution of a man who had learned what happens when strength meets loss. His hair was dark brown, cut short, already threaded with premature gray. A faint scar cut through his right eyebrow, a souvenir from a snowmobile accident 10 years earlier that had taken his partner and very nearly his faith in luck. Since that winter, Nathan walked with a little more care, spoke with a little less certainty, and carried himself like someone who had made peace with the fact that the world does not always reward good intentions. The station was mostly empty. The night shift was small in winter, storms kept people inside, and the town learned to settle its problems before the roads disappeared. The heater rattled like an old man coughing in his sleep. Outside, the wind pressed its face against the windows. Nathan was finishing a routine report when something moved beyond the glass. Not a car, not a drifting shadow. Something lower, smaller. He leaned forward. At first, he thought it was trash. White Willow collected its garbage on Fridays, and the wind had a habit of scattering bags like ghosts across the streets. But this was moving against the wind, slowly, unevenly, with effort. Nathan stood. The shape emerged from the swirl of snow, a small, black form, hunched and shaking, dragging something behind it. He pushed open the station door. The cold slapped him hard, stealing his breath, the storm swallowing the light at his back. Snow piled instantly on his boots. The figure came into focus. It was a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 5 months old, all legs and ears and hollow ribs, coat black as wet coal, the tan markings barely visible beneath layers of frost and grime. Its ears were too large for its narrow head and kept folding sideways in the wind. Its paws were raw and pink at the edges, bleeding where the ice had cut them. Every step it took was uncertain, but its jaw was locked around the handle of a torn, soaked fabric bag. The bag was heavy. Too heavy for something that small. The puppy, later he would name him Ash, though he did not know that yet, stopped, sides heaving, breath puffing out in frantic white clouds. He rested for 2 seconds, then lowered his head again and pulled. Nathan's chest tightened. The wind caught the bag and lifted one corner. For the briefest moment, Nathan saw something pale inside. A small white paw slid out, limp, wrong against the snow. Nathan's body moved before his mind did. "Ash, no. Hey, easy, boy," he said, though the dog did not know his name yet, voice gentle, palms open. The puppy did not retreat. He stepped in front of the bag and growled, not a sound of anger, but of terror. His eyes were enormous, dark, shining with a fear so sharp it hurt to look at. Nathan knelt, the snow soaking his jeans. "I'm not taking it from you," he said softly. "I swear." He slid his hands under the bag. It was light, terrifyingly light. Inside was another German Shepherd puppy, about 4 months old. Her coat a pale white gold beneath the filth, her body stiff with cold, her breath barely there. Her ribs moved in shallow, uncertain rises. Ice clung to her whiskers. Nathan scooped them both up, the bag, the white pup inside, the black one still clinging to the handle, and ran back into the station. He slammed the door with his heel. The warmth hit them like a wall. Behind the front desk stood Sarah Whitman, the night dispatcher, 38, tall and thin with copper-red hair twisted into a loose knot and a face that carried both sharp intelligence and the permanent softness of someone who had learned too young how to listen. Sarah had lost her younger brother to a drunk driver when she was 20. Since then, she treated every emergency like it might be the last chance someone had. She took one look at the bundle in Nathan's arms and swore, "Oh my God." "Call White Willow Animal Care," Nathan said. "Now." Sarah was already dialing. The puppy, Ash, finally released the handle and climbed onto the table beside his sister, nose pressed against her neck, breathing when she forgot how. Outside, the snow kept falling. The heater in White Willow Animal Care had been running for hours, but the building still felt like a shelter in the middle of a storm. Warm only because someone refused to let the cold win. Dr. Emily Hart stood at the stainless steel examination table, sleeves rolled past her elbows, hands steady despite the frost that still clung to her coat. Emily was 45, slender, with pale skin and short dark hair streaked with silver that came from too many nights spent under fluorescent lights and too many decisions that could not be undone. Her eyes were a soft gray, gentle but sharp, the eyes of a woman who had learned to care without promising miracles. She had grown up on a ranch outside Billings and lost her first horse to colic at 14. That was when she decided the world would never break her ability to show up. On the table lay the white puppy, later named Ivory, wrapped in heated towels, a clear oxygen mask covering her muzzle. Her small chest fluttered like a bird trapped behind glass. Beside the table, the black puppy, Ash, 5 months old, ribs showing through his wet coat, stood on trembling legs, front paws hooked over the edge, eyes locked on her face as if staring long enough could glue her together. Nathan Cole remained close, jacket still on, hands shoved into his pockets because he did not trust them not to shake. Emily checked Ivory's gums. Still pale. "Temperature?" Nathan asked. 34 Celsius. That's severe hypothermia. She did not sugarcoat it. She never did. Lucas Meyer, the veterinary technician, moved quietly around the room, tall and narrow, 26, blonde hair always falling into his eyes no matter how often he cut it. Lucas had grown up in foster homes, moving 7 times before he turned 10, and animals had become the one thing that stayed when nothing else did. He hung a small IV line and taped it to Ivory's fragile leg. Ash watched every movement. When Emily placed the oxygen mask, Ash let out a broken sound, not quite a whine, not quite a bark, and tried to climb higher onto the table. Nathan caught him gently. "Easy, boy." Ash froze, then pressed his face into Nathan's chest as if he had finally reached something solid in the storm. Emily met Nathan's eyes. "She's alive," she said, "but it's going to be a long road. She's been cold too long, lack of oxygen, possible neurological damage. We won't know until she stabilizes." Nathan nodded, once. They worked for nearly 2 hours. Warm fluids, oxygen, gentle rubbing to restore circulation. Ash never left the table. He would lower his head until his nose touched Ivory's paw, then lift it again, as if counting breaths. When the first slight improvement came, Ivory's chest rising a little stronger, the monitor settling into a faint rhythm, Emily exhaled. "Okay," she said quietly. "We've bought her some time." Nathan did not know what to say, so he said nothing. Later that night, when the worst of the crisis had passed, Emily pulled Nathan aside. "We need to contact Northern Ridge Rescue," she said. "They handle abandoned cases." The call was made. By morning, a coordinator arrived. Karen Bloom was 52, medium height, sturdy build, dark curls tucked into a knit cap, the face of someone who had learned to hold grief without dropping it. She had lost her husband to cancer 5 years earlier and had thrown herself into rescue work with a devotion that bordered on dangerous. Karen listened to the medical summary in silence. Finally, she sighed. "The black pup, Ash, he's young, underweight, but strong, high adoption potential. The white one." She looked at Ivory, who was barely moving. "Her care will be expensive. Long term, we have limited resources." Nathan felt something twist behind his ribs. Karen continued, careful, professional. "We will open a file on both. But realistically, we may only be able to guarantee placement for the stronger pup if things don't improve." Nathan's voice came out low. They stay together. Karen hesitated. That's not how this works. It is today. Karen studied him. Officer Cole, I understand how this feels, but rescue is math as much as heart. Nathan looked back at Ash, who had placed one paw on Ivory's chest, nose against her ear. I don't care about the math, Nathan said. He dragged her across a blizzard. Karen closed her eyes for a moment. We'll reevaluate in 48 hours, she said. Over the next 3 days, Ivory remained fragile. Sometimes she responded. Sometimes she faded. Ash stayed glued to her side, refusing food, refusing water, moving only when Nathan physically lifted him. Emily finally pulled Nathan aside again. She's stable enough to leave the clinic, she said, but she'll need constant monitoring, warmth, medication, physical support. Nathan didn't hesitate. I'll take them. Emily studied him. You sure? He was. That night, the storm outside finally eased. White Willow lay buried in quiet snow, the mountains holding their breath. In Nathan's small cabin on the edge of town, the fire burned low. Ivory lay in a padded crate near the hearth, wrapped in blankets, IV removed but oxygen still nearby. Ash lay curled against her, his chin on her neck, eyes half closed but never truly asleep. Nathan sat on the floor, back against the couch, watching them. Winter had tried to take them. It hadn't won. By the time Nathan Cole's truck reached the narrow gravel road that led to his cabin, the storm had finally loosened its grip on White Willow. The wind no longer screamed. It whispered, tired of its own fury. Snow clung to the trees like 1,000 small prayers left behind by the night. The moon, thin and pale, slipped between clouds and watched him unload the carrier as if this were not a rescue, but a ritual. Nathan was careful with every movement. He had learned in years of policing a town that could bury you with its silence, that life sometimes required more patience than courage. He carried the crate into the cabin and set it beside the hearth where the fire had already been burning low and steady since morning, thanks to a timer he had set before leaving for the clinic. Warmth spread in wide circles across the wood floor. The crate held Ivory 4 months old, white gold coat dulled by days of fear, breath thin and uneven, and Ash, 5 months old, black coat patchy where frost and filth still clung, ribs visible when he stretched. Ash had refused to be separated at the clinic, so Nathan had cut a soft opening in the crate door and let him press inside with her. Now he lay curled along Ivory's spine, his chin resting on her neck like a pledge. Nathan knelt. He adjusted the blankets, checked the small thermometer taped to Ivory's side, and set the portable oxygen unit within reach. He moved like someone afraid that too much sound would undo everything they had fought for. Outside, the world held its breath. Inside, the fire cracked once, then again. A low, patient applause. He did not know how long it had been when the room began to feel wrong. It was not a noise. It was the absence of one. Nathan leaned forward, his knee popping in the quiet. Ivory's chest was barely moving. Her mouth hung open a fraction, the breath no longer fluttering, only drifting when it remembered to. Ash, Nathan whispered, though he did not know why. Ash lifted his head. His ears, too big for his narrow skull, tilted forward. He pressed his nose to Ivory's muzzle, then to her chest, then to her paw. A small, broken sound left his throat, a sound that seemed to come from someplace that had no words for fear. Nathan reached for the phone and the emergency number Dr. Emily Hart had given him. The call connected on the first ring. Emily's voice was calm, the kind of calm that came from too many nights like this one. Tell me what you're seeing. Respiration's shallow, Nathan said. Temperature dropping. Warm compresses. Now. Gums what color? Gray. Okay, keep her horizontal. Gentle stimulation. Count with me. He moved as instructed. He did not realize his hands were shaking until Ash nudged his wrist with his nose. Not impatient, not demanding, simply reminding him that time had become small and precious. Minutes passed. Then another long minute that felt like the first one had swallowed all the others. Ivory's body jerked once. A jagged inhale cut the air. Then nothing. Ash pressed his ear to her chest. He listened so hard his whole body went still. Another breath came, thin as a thread. Then another. Emily's voice stayed with Nathan until the numbers stabilized into something that resembled hope, though neither of them dared call it that. When the call ended, Nathan sat on the floor with his back against the cabinet and let his legs stretch out, the ache in his knees suddenly loud. Ash climbed onto him without asking. He wedged himself between Nathan's ribs and Ivory's crate. His small body curved into the space where worry had been living. At some point, he closed his eyes, though his paw remained draped across Ivory's chest, counting what mattered. The night thinned. The fire softened. The world outside slipped from black to the blue-gray of approaching morning. When light finally touched the frost on the window, Ivory opened one eye. Not the empty roll from before. A real blink, slow and uncertain, like she was surfacing from a deep place and trying to remember where the air was. She tried to lift her head. Her neck wobbled. Her body tilted. Ash was there before gravity finished its sentence. He slid under her, a black shoulder becoming a wall. She leaned against him and did not fall. Nathan laughed, the sound tearing out of him before he could stop it, and then he covered his mouth because he did not want to scare them. Over the next days, life rearranged itself around the small square of floor by the hearth. Nathan canceled shifts when he could, traded patrols when he could not. Dr. Emily Hart visited every morning, checking Ivory's reflexes, adjusting medication, teaching Nathan how to massage her legs to coax the nerves into remembering their jobs. Lucas Meyer dropped off supplies in the evenings, quiet and smiling, careful not to crowd the room. Ivory learned to sit, then to stand, though she wobbled like a foal on ice. When she tried to walk, her paws spread wide, her steps crooked, her courage larger than her body. Each time she stumbled, Ash braced her with his shoulder. Each time she fell, he lay down first so she could land on him. He never complained. He never looked away. A week passed, then another. One afternoon, when the sun finally returned and the mountains shone like silver ribs against the sky, Ivory took 3 steps across the rug by herself. She leaned too far and tipped, landing on Ash in a heap of white and black. Ash's tail thumped once, then again, as if this were the finest thing he had ever accomplished. Nathan sat on the floor and whispered names he had been holding in his chest for days. Ash, he said, touching the black pup's back, thinking of fire that had burned and left something that still glowed. Lumen, he said, resting his fingers on the white pup's neck, thinking of light that refused to go out. At the end of the second week, Karen Bloom from Northern Ridge Rescue came by. She took in the scene, the blankets, the heat pads, the pups arranged like a living equation of loyalty and survival. "She's improved," Karen said. "Yes," Nathan answered. "She's also going to need long-term care, therapy, time, and Ash, he's thriving. He'd be easy to place." Nathan did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "They stay together," he said. "That's the condition." Karen looked at Ash, who had shifted his body so that his whole side covered Lumen's shoulder, as if bad news could not pass through him if he was wide enough. "We'll continue to reassess," Karen said. Nathan watched her leave. He shut the door. He returned to the floor. Outside, the snow finally stopped. Inside, winter loosened its hold. The first thing winter gives back is silence. Not the empty kind, but the gentle kind. The kind that settles when a storm has finished saying everything it knows. By the third week in Nathan Cole's cabin, the world outside White Willow had become a place of pale sunlight and blue shadows. Snowdrifts no longer moved. The mountains stood still as if listening. Inside, life was learning how to begin again. Lumen lay on the rug near the hearth, her white gold coat finely clean, her body still thin, but no longer frighteningly so. At 4 months old, she had grown a little, though her legs still trembled when she stood too long. Her eyes were bright now, the kind of bright that asked questions. Each breath came easier than the last, though every movement required careful negotiation between will and muscle. Ash, 5 months old, black coat shining with health where frost and dirt had once clung, rarely left her side. He had learned the exact distance required to keep her steady without crowding her. When Lumen stood, he rose with her. When she walked, he paced at her shoulder. When she fell, he lowered himself first. Nathan watched this in silence most mornings, coffee forgotten, the cold forgotten, the years forgotten. He had once believed he understood loyalty. Men standing together in blizzards, partners pulling each other from wreckage, vows spoken under quiet skies. He had been wrong. This was something older. Dr. Emily Hart arrived just after sunrise, her old Subaru crunching up the drive, the trunk heavy with equipment and quiet hope. She knelt on the rug and examined Lumen's reflexes, her face calm, her voice low. "Progress," she said. "Slow, but real. She'll always be different, but different isn't broken." Nathan nodded. He had learned that word the hard way. Later that afternoon, Karen Bloom returned. Karen had changed her coat since the last visit, but the weight behind her eyes remained the same. She crouched to Ash's level, offering her fingers. Ash sniffed once, then turned back to Lumen. Karen exhaled. "I'll be honest with you, Nathan. Our board is pushing. We need to start moving Ash into placement. He's healthy. He's adoptable. Lumen, she's complicated." Nathan did not argue. He simply sat on the floor beside the pups and rested his hand against Ash's shoulder. "They're not two dogs," he said quietly. "They're one story." Karen closed her eyes for a moment. "I know, but rescue doesn't run on stories." Nathan looked at Lumen, who was struggling to cross the rug. Her left paw twisted inward, her body tilted. Ash slid closer. She leaned against him and did not fall. "Then it should," Nathan said. The weeks passed. Winter loosened further. Sunlight stretched longer across the snow. Lumen's strength improved inch by inch. She learned how to climb the single step to the porch. She learned how to correct her balance when the floor shifted. Every achievement was written across Ash's face like victory. On a quiet morning in early March, Nathan finally took them to the clinic for their extended evaluation. The waiting room was warm, filled with the sounds of life continuing. A gray cat in a carrier complaining about everything, a golden retriever thumping his tail against the floor, an old woman named Martha Keene, 72, short and round with soft white hair and a smile that had outlived two husbands, whispering to her nervous terrier. Martha had been a school librarian for 40 years and had adopted every animal that wandered into her yard until her doctor finally told her to stop. She watched Ash and Lumen cross the floor together. "Well," Martha said, "that's something you don't see every day." Lumen stumbled. Ash braced. Martha's eyes filled. In the exam room, Emily reviewed the results. "Her neurological deficits are permanent. She'll improve, but she will always need support. Ash's presence stabilizes her." Karen listened. Nathan listened. The future sat between them. Karen folded her clipboard. "We'll start outreach," she said. And so it began. The story of the two puppies from the storm spread through White Willow and beyond. A photo of Ash standing over Lumen in the snow. A short video of Lumen taking her first steps with Ash guarding her side. Donations came. Messages arrived. Offers, questions, promises. Some people asked for Ash alone. Nathan said no. One afternoon, while the snow melted into rivers along the road, Karen returned with a quiet smile. "There's a couple," she said. "Retired, no children, stable income. They want both. They understand the work." Nathan felt his chest tighten. "They're coming tomorrow." That night, Nathan sat on the porch while Ash and Lumen slept by the fire. The mountains glowed faintly under the moon. Winter had not defeated them, but it had changed them. And change, Nathan knew, was its own kind of mercy. White Willow did not wake up all at once. It stretched into morning the way old towns do, slowly, carefully, as if testing whether the world had truly become safe again. By the time March softened the edges of winter, the story of Ash and Lumen had already rooted itself into the town's daily language. People spoke their names in the diner, in the post office, in the small hardware store where the owner, Frank Dillard, 63, tall, weathered, and permanently smelling of pine sap and coffee, kept a corkboard near the register. On that board hung a photograph of a black puppy braced against a white one, snow piled around them like the ruins of an old war. Nathan Cole saw that photograph every time he bought dog food. It had been taken by Lydia Perez, 29, the editor of the White Willow Chronicle, short, energetic, hair always escaping her braid, the kind of woman who believed stories could keep a town alive. Lydia had grown up in foster care and knew what it meant to be passed over. When she first heard about the puppies, she drove out in the storm with her camera and waited in the cold until Lumen took her first shaky steps across the porch while Ash circled like a guardian spirit. Lydia's article ran 2 days later. So did the donations. Money arrived from towns Nathan had never heard of. Blankets, food, therapy equipment, even a custom-built ramp for Lumen's future home were delivered to the rescue office. Karen Bloom worked the phone for 12 hours straight, her voice hoarse but steady, her clipboard now thick with names and numbers and promises. Every offer to adopt Ash alone was declined. Every single one. Because that was the line Nathan would not cross. The couple Karen had mentioned came on a Friday morning when the snow finally broke into water along the roadside. Their names were Thomas and Evelyn Brooks. Thomas was 71, tall and thin with silver hair and a slow, thoughtful voice. He had once been an engineer for the railroads and now walked with a slight limp from a fall off a platform 30 years earlier. Evelyn was 68, small, dark-haired, warm-eyed, the kind of woman who smiled with her whole face. She had taught kindergarten for 4 decades and still carried tiny animal stickers in her purse for no good reason except hope. They parked their old blue Subaru at the edge of Nathan's drive and stepped out into the thawing air. Evelyn saw Lumen first. She was standing on the porch, wobbling in the sunlight, her white gold coat glowing like frost that had learned how to breathe. Ash was beside her, shoulder touching hers, watching the strangers with solemn patience. Evelyn's hand flew to her mouth. Thomas said nothing. He simply nodded. Inside, they listened. Nathan told them everything. The storm, the bag, the long night, the damage that would never fully go away. Emily had already spoken to them at the clinic. Karen had made sure the words were clear. They did not interrupt. When Nathan finished, Evelyn crouched in front of Lumen and held out her palm. Lumen leaned forward, sniffed, and pressed her nose into it. Ash watched, then allowed himself to sit. Evelyn laughed softly. "They've already decided," she said. The paperwork took weeks. Home visits, financial reviews, veterinary plans, long conversations about medication schedules, therapy routines, fall risks, and what to do on the nights when fear returned. Through it all, the town stayed with them. Martha Keene dropped off handmade sweaters. Frank Dillard built a wider porch ramp himself. Lydia updated the Chronicle every step of the way. By early April, everything was approved. The handover happened on a quiet afternoon with clouds drifting like old ships across the sky. Ash loaded into the carrier without hesitation. Lumen followed, carefully, slowly, with Ash turning back every 3 steps to check on her. When the car pulled away, Nathan stood at the edge of the drive, hands in his jacket pockets, chest tight with a feeling he had not named in years. The house felt too big without them. But the story was not finished. A week later, Lydia's phone rang. Evelyn's voice was bright and breathless. "She's walking across the kitchen now, by herself." The Chronicle ran the update. White Willow exhaled. Spring did not arrive in White Willow all at once. It came the way healing does, quietly, without ceremony, in small, undeniable pieces. By mid-April, the last of the snow had retreated into the mountains, leaving behind long silver streams that whispered along the roads. The air softened, the light changed. The town began to breathe like someone who had survived something and was only now realizing it. 3 hours south of White Willow, in a valley the old map still called Hawthorne Glen, a small white house waited at the end of a gravel lane. It had belonged to Thomas and Evelyn Brooks for almost 40 years, and in that time it had learned how to hold grief and hope without favoring either. That morning, Evelyn stood in the doorway with her coat still on, watching the yard. Ash and Lumen had been there for exactly 2 weeks. Lumen moved across the grass with the patience of a creature relearning the language of ground. Her steps were slow, wide, uncertain, but they were hers. Each time her balance faltered, Ash slipped into place, his black shoulder fitting against her side as if he had been built for nothing else. Ash had grown. At 5 months, he was already starting to look less like a puppy and more like a promise. His coat shone. His eyes carried a calm that did not belong to his age. He watched the world carefully, but without fear. Evelyn smiled and wiped her hands on her coat. "Thomas," she called, "she's crossing the yard again." Thomas came to the door, leaning on his cane, his silver hair catching the sunlight. "That's the 4th time today," he said. "She's showing off." Lumen stumbled. Ash braced. She did not fall. Thomas nodded. "Told you." Inside, the house had been rearranged to make room for them, rugs layered across the floor, a ramp at the back step, soft lights in the corners, medication schedules on the fridge. Therapy exercises pinned to the wall with a magnet shaped like a little duck that Evelyn had bought for no reason except that it made her laugh. When the phone rang, Evelyn answered on the second ring. "Evelyn Brooks." It was Lydia Perez, her voice bright. "The town's waiting for today's update." Evelyn looked through the window at the two puppies tangled together in the grass. "Tell them she's walking," she said. "Not perfect, not fast, but she's walking." Lydia inhaled. "They're going to love that." They did. By evening, White Willow's cafe was buzzing with the news. Frank Dillard pinned the update beneath the old storm photo. Martha Keene cried into her tea. And in Nathan Cole's cabin, the silence that had followed the puppy's departure finally loosened its grip. Nathan stood on his porch, hands on the railing, watching the mountains settle into twilight. He had returned to work. He had returned to routine. But something in him had shifted, not broken, not healed, simply moved to a place it had never been before. His phone buzzed. It was a photo. Lumen in the kitchen. Ash beside her. Both of them wearing bandanas Evelyn had sewn from an old curtain. Nathan laughed. Weeks passed. May arrived with green. Lumen learned to climb the porch ramp by herself. Then the small step into the living room. Then the slope of the garden path. Her gait remained uneven, but her determination grew stronger with every fall she refused to remember. Ash never stopped guarding her. One afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled across the valley. Lumen froze when the sky cracked. Ash moved between her and the noise, chest out, tail low, eyes steady. She pressed her nose into his neck until the world became quiet again. In White Willow, the Chronicle ran a full-page follow-up. The headline read, "From Blizzard to Backyard, the puppies who taught a town how to hope." By June, Lumen could cross the yard without stopping. By July, she learned how to run. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't fast. But when she ran, Ash ran with her, and the two of them became a blur of black and white against the summer grass. On a warm evening in August, Thomas and Evelyn invited Nathan to dinner. Nathan stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure of where to put his hands. Lumen reached him first, wobbling, tail thumping. Ash followed, pressed his forehead to Nathan's knee, and then turned back to Lumen like he had never left her side. Evelyn watched from the kitchen, eyes shining. "They remember," she said. Thomas poured coffee. "Some bonds don't fade." After dinner, they all sat on the porch while the sky turned orange and the crickets tuned their instruments. Lumen lay between Ash's front paws, her head resting on his leg. Ash closed his eyes. The snow that had once tried to take them was now only a story the mountains told the wind. They had won. Sometimes God does not send a miracle as thunder from the sky. Sometimes he sends it as a small black puppy in the snow, refusing to let go of the one he loves. This story reminds us that faith is not only something we speak, it is something we live. Every time we choose compassion over comfort, every time we help someone when it would be easier to walk away, we become part of the miracle. In our daily lives, we may not face blizzards or broken puppies, but we all carry someone who needs our strength, your kindness, your patience, your willingness to stay. These are the ways God still writes hope into this world. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment so we know you are here, and subscribe to the channel so more stories of light can reach more people. May God bless every one of you watching. May he protect your families, your hearts, and your journeys. If you believe in this message of hope, type Amen in the comments.